Decrease in biodiversity is imminent worldwide. Vertebrates fell to 60% from the 1970s due to human causes. It is projected that by 2020, wildlife decline will be 67% of the present number. The Worldwide Fund for Nature and Zoological Society of London reported an annual decrease in wildlife by 2%. A major cause is human population, which has doubled in the number since 1960 to 7.4 billion. Humans have industrialized the natural habitat of wildlife as well as marine life. Leaving these creatures with no place to live would eventually cause their death. Marco Lambertini, the general director of WWF International, described that the disappearance of wildlife is an unprecedented rate. Earth might enter the sixth mass extinction event according to experts. Mass extinction is described as the disappearance of wildlife is at unprecedented rate. Each might enter the sixth mass extinction event according to experts. Mass extinction is described as the disappearance of species at a rate of 1,000 faster than usual. Moreover, the disappearance of species in a certain environment causes an imbalance in the ecosystem, producing more chaotic changes than harm the entire ecosystem. This is but a pressing statement for people to know more about the importance of our diverse environment and how human activities can either contribute to its growth or destruction. There is a growing importance of studying how society, environment, and health is interrelated to each other. That if human those components, the other remaining components can be affected and compromised. Thus, it is timely to know about the pressing effects of species being extinct and that of our ecosystem being imbalanced.
Biodiversity and ecosystem. According to Village Globally 2009, biodiversity is the variability among living organisms from all sources, including terrestrial, marine, and aquatic ecosystems, and the ecological complexes of which they are a part. This includes diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystems. Biodiversity is the source of the essential goods and ecological services that constitute the source of life for all, and it has direct consumptive value in food, agriculture, medicine, and in industry. Therefore, understanding biodiversity within the concept of ecosystems needs a thorough study on the relationships of the biotic, the living organisms, and the abiotic, non-living organisms. It is true that people will always depend on biodiversity on the wholeness of our being and in our everyday lives. More health will ultimately depend upon the products and services that we acquire from the ecosystem. Somehow, there are ways and processes in the ecosystem that are not apparent nor appreciated by us, human beings. Think about the need to drink clean and fresh water, the need to eat healthy vegetables and foods, or the need of man to transport, which makes him rely on fuel. All of these are human needs that are answered and provided by our ecosystem. Thus, if we fail to keep the process of taking care of our ecosystem, it is us who are actually putting our lives at risk. Significant decline in biodiversity has direct human impact when ecosystem in its insufficiency can no longer provide the physical as well as the social needs of human beings. Indirectly changes in the ecosystem affect livelihood, income, and on occasion may even cause political conflict. Changes in biodiversity. A change in biodiversity could have erratic effects not only in wildlife or marine life but also in human beings. For example, humans inhabiting the forest would disturb their natural order of life. Trees and plants would be affected in the land clearing operations where the house would be built. The animals, insects, and all types of life forms in the cleared area would either be displaced nor most likely be killed. The loss of these life forms could affect the entire ecosystem governing that environment. There are five major threats to biodiversity identified by the United Nations Environment Programme. First, the habitat loss and destruction. The habitat loss due to destruction, fragmentation, or degradation of habitat is the primary threat to the survival of wildlife, for which it is the inhabitation of human beings and the use of land for economic gains. When an ecosystem has been dramatically changed by human activities such as agriculture, oil and gas exploration, commercial development, or water diversion, it may no longer be able to provide the food, water, cover, and places to raise young that wildlife need to survive. Every day, there are fewer places left that wildlife can call home. Second threat of biodiversity is climate change. Global climate change has already had observable effects on the environment. Glaciers have shrunk, ice on rivers and lakes is breaking up earlier, plants and animals' ranges have shifted, and trees are flowering sooner. Loss of sea ice, accelerated sea level rise and longer, and more intense heat waves. Third threat of biodiversity is pollution and contaminants. Pollution is the introduction of harmful materials into the environment. These harmful materials are called pollutants. Pollutants can be natural, such as volcanic ash. They can also be created by human activity, such as trash or runoff produced by factories. It literally damages the quality of air, water, and land. The fourth threat of biodiversity is invasive species. An invasive species is most often a non-native species that spreads from a point of introduction to become naturalized and negatively alters its new environment. It adversely affects the invaded habitats and bioregions, causing ecological, environmental, and/or economic damage. All of these plants and animals are invasive species that cause catastrophic damage in their new ecosystems. In many cases, humans are responsible for the spread and reacting to their impact. The fifth threat of biodiversity is overexploitation. Overexploitation means harvesting species from the wild at rates faster than natural populations can recover. Overfishing and overhunting are both types of overexploitation. Currently, about a third of the world's endangered vertebrates are threatened by overexploitation.
Today, in the present, technology improves a lot and also science. But despite of that improvement, we still have a lot to learn about biodiversity, more so about the consequences of biodiversity loss. Biodiversity loss, also called loss of biodiversity, a decrease in biodiversity within a species, ecosystem, geographic area, and Earth as the whole. Biodiversity loss describes the decline in the number, genetic variability, variety of species, and the biological communities in a given area. This loss in variety of life can lead to a breakdown in the functioning of the ecosystem where decline has happened. Associating biodiversity loss with species loss alone overlooks other subtle phenomena that threaten long-term ecosystem health. Sudden population declines may upset social structures in some species, which may keep surviving males and females from finding mates, which may then produce further population declines. Declines in genetic diversity that accompany rapid falls in population may increase in breeding, mating between closely related individuals, which could produce a further decline in genetic diversity. The basic concept about biodiversity loss was from Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. Intact ecosystem function best since the organisms composing them are specialized to function in the ecosystem to capture, transfer, utilize, and ultimately lose both energy and nutrients. The particular species making up an ecosystem determine its productivity, affect nutrient cycles and soil contents, and influence environmental conditions such as water cycles, weather patterns, climate, and non-biotic aspects. The loss of biodiversity has many consequences that we understand and many that we do not. It is apparent that humankind is willing to sustain a great deal of biodiversity loss if there are concomitant benefits to society. In many cases, the benefit seems to accrue to a few individuals only, which nets social loss. However, it is extremely difficult to estimate the future cost of losses in biodiversity or of environmental damage. As stated by Tellman, the Earth will retain its most striking feature, its biodiversity, only if humans nave the prescience to do so. This will occur, it seems, only if we realize the extent to which we use biodiversity.
Nutritional impact of biodiversity. Biodiversity plays a crucial role in human nutrition through its influence on world food production, as it ensures the sustainable productivity of soils and provides the genetic resources for all crops, livestock, and marine species harvested for food. Access to a sufficiency of a nutritious variety of food is a fundamental determinant of health. Globalization, poverty, modern agricultural practices, and changes in dietary patterns have led to a nutrition transition. The nutrition transition is a process by which development, globalization, poverty, and subsequent changes in lifestyle have led to excessive dietary energy intakes, poor quality diet, and low physical activity. A society or a population must have access to a sufficient variety of nutritious food as it is a determinant of their health as human beings. According to the World Health Organization, or WHO 2007, biodiversity is a vital element of a human being's nutrition because of its influence to food production. Biodiversity is a major factor that contributes to sustainable food production for human beings. Nutrition and biodiversity are linked at many levels. First, the ecosystem, with food production as an ecosystem service. Second is the species in the ecosystem. And lastly, the genetic diversity within species. Nutritional composition between foods and among varieties, cultivars, breeds of the same food can differ dramatically, affecting micronutrient availability in the diet. Habitat simplification, species loss, and species succession enhance communities. Vulnerabilities as a function of environmental receptivity to ill health. Healthy local diets with adequate average level of nutrients necessitates maintenance of high biodiversity levels, intensified and enhanced food production through irrigation, use of fertilizer, plant protection or pesticides, or the introduction of crop varieties and cropping patterns affect biodiversity, and those impact global nutritional status and human health.
Health, biology, and biodiversity. Almost all living organisms are dependent to their environment to live and produce. Basic needs of living organisms such as air, water, food, and habitat are provided by its environment. The evolution of human beings was due to the improved access to these basic needs. Advances in agriculture, sanitation, water treatment, and hygiene have had a far greater impact on human health than medical technology. Environmental hazards increase the risk of cancer, heart disease, asthma, and many other illnesses. These hazards can be physical, such as pollution, toxic chemicals, and food contaminants, or they can be social, such as dangerous work, poor housing conditions, urban sprawl, and poverty. Unsafe drinking water and poor sanitation and hygiene are responsible for a variety of infectious diseases such as schistosomiasis, diarrhea, cholera, meningitis, and gastritis. In 2015, approximately 350,000 children under the age of 5 died from diarrheal diseases related to unsafe drinking water, and approximately 1.8 billion people used drinking water contaminated with feces. More than 2 billion people lack access to basic sanitation. The interrelation between human health and biological diversity considerable and complex. With the current biodiversity loss at unprecedented rates, the delicate balance between human health and biological diversity is at risk.
Some human illnesses that are found to be related with its environment include Parkinson's disease, heart disease, cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, diabetes, obesity, occupational injuries, dysentery, arthritis, malaria, and depression. Activities that promote health and extend human life could also have adverse environmental effects. For example, food production causes environmental damage from pesticides and fertilizers. Soil salinization, waste produced by livestock, carbon emissions from food manufacturing and transportation, deforestation, and overfishing. Healthcare facilities also have adverse environmental impacts. Hospitals use large quantities of electricity and fossil fuels and produce medical waste. According to experts, climate change could also have a serious impact on human health and could deteriorate farming systems and reduce nutrients in some foods. In this case, biodiversity increases resilience, thus helping adjust to new environmental conditions. Relationships between human health and the environment raise many ethical, social, and legal dilemmas by forcing people to choose among competing values. Many are the issues at the intersection of health and the environment have to do with managing benefits and risks. For example, pesticides play an important role in increasing crop yields, but they can also pose hazards to human health and the environment. Energy production and use help sustain human life, but it can also pose hazards to human health and the environment, such as air and water pollution, oil spills, and destruction of habitats. Climate change is likely to cause tremendous harm to the environment and human health, but taking steps to drastically reduce greenhouse gases could have adverse consequences for global, national, and local economies. Communities and nations should wisely choose a site for a factory, power plant, or waste dump, or regulating safety in the workplace to minimize impact to the society. The decision-making process should be fair, open, and democratic so that people who will be affected by environmental risks have a voice in this deliberation.